I'm Davy. I'm awesome! And welcome to Davy's Awesome Wrestling, where I review wrestling-related things all from the perspective of a fan, not an insider. So this week, being that I am a belt mark and I've been a belt mark for a very long time, thought I'd go old school with a promotion I fell in love with instantly when I saw them in WWE. ECW. ECW was a promotion I did not have a lot of exposure to growing up on the West Coast until they debuted on Raw promoting their very first pay-per-view, which I did order, and I was hooked ever since. And of course, one thing that intrigues me is the championship title belts. So I thought I would go back and rank all of ECW's championships. Now, a couple things of criteria. I am not including what I call the WWECW era, when WWE bought out ECW, put it back on, and butchered it. I'm not including the two championships they had. The first incantation of their world championship was pretty much exactly the same design as the last ECW championship to be in the real ECW, except that they put a bunch of black paint inside of it to, I guess, make it stand out more, but it hurt really bad. It actually was very ugly. And then they changed it for that silver phoenix, big, huge strap, ugly monstrosity. Ugh. I'll say this much about that title. If I were to include it in these rankings, it would be at the very bottom. And I will be including the two versions of the FTW Championship. So, let's get going. So this overall brings in 11 championship belts. Number 11, the very worst I would say, would be the very first version of the ECW Television Championship. This championship was ugly as sin. It was horrible. I take nothing away from its prestige. This was the championship that helped launch careers of guys like Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Jericho. But it was terrible looking. The main plate was very reminiscent of the 1986 version of the WWF Championship, the one most of us remember from WrestleMania 3. But then it had no side plates at all. None. And I remember at one point my brother and I talking about what it would be like to have a championship belt that had no side plates, and me saying like, I think that would be terrible, and my brother saying like, I don't know, that might be interesting, until him and I watched the very first ECW pay-per-view, Barely Legal, and while they were showing a montage of the rivalry between Pitbull number 2 and Shane Douglas, who was the TV champion at the time, they showed Shane Douglas wearing that original ECW Television Championship, and I remember my brother looking over at me and going like, yeah, you're right. They need at least one side plate on each side. So yeah, sorry. As much as I love the prestige of this belt, that one was terrible. In at number 10, another design I was not very crazy about was the original FTW Championship. Now granted, Taz had even talked about it. For the original FTW Championship, they had just taken an old TV championship because they had just updated their belts. They took it, they spray painted the strap orange and put a couple of Taz stickers on it. But still, I didn't like it. Even though I did like the TV championship. A lot of people get confused by that. They're like, but you love the Winged Eagle Championship, and the main plate was basically the Winged Eagle plate. But whereas we'll get more into that later, it wasn't the same as like the WWF Winged Eagle World Championship. There was a lot of differences. And ultimately, I've talked about before, I'm not usually very big on colored straps, and to me, orange really just did not work for a championship title at all. For some reason, I don't mind when the backing of the championship strap is a different color, like the current FTW Championship has an orange backing, and the original version of the last ECW Championship had that orange snakeskin backing, which I thought was really cool. But for the main strap, I didn't like it. I thought it was very ugly. I liked the concept of the FTW Championship. Shane Douglas wasn't willing to give him a World Championship match, so he just came up with his F the World Championship, but just didn't like the look of the belt. In at number 9, the very first ECW Championship. This belt was big and bulky and horrible looking. In my opinion, the main plate was just way too big for how small the side plates were, not to mention just the overall design and the colors on it, just they didn't work together. They later took the main banner in the middle where it said Eastern Championship Wrestling and changed it to ECW. And yeah, sure, this was the title that was held by some of the greats that I loved, like the Sandman and Mikey Whipwreck, and of course, Shane Douglas. But again, I'm glad by the time I started watching ECW, this was gone. In at number 8, the second version of the FTW Championship. This is where we get into the point where I don't really hate it. It just wasn't my favorite. However, this one was a custom-made championship for Taz. Like, it had Taz engraved at the top. It's still there. It has the side plates that say FTW on the side, not to mention the one at the end that says Bring It, and the other one that is clearly an obscene gesture. And like I said, it's also got the orange coloring on the back of it, which for some reason, when it's on the back, adds a nice little touch. And this is actually still being used. It was brought back soon after Taz signed on to AEW, and he awarded it to Brian Cage, his guy. He later lost it to Ricky Starks, the next Taz guy who's been holding it. So technically, there's only been 4 FTW champions. Taz, Sabu, Brian Cage, and Ricky Starks. Whereas this has never been an officially recognized title, it's a cool belt. I like it. In at number 7 was the third and final version of the ECW Tag Team Championships. I did like these, especially because first time I saw them, they were really cool with the purple snakeskin backing, and Raven had just come out and taken it from the Dudleys so that he and Tommy Dreamer would leave as tag team champions because Dudleys were going to WWE. And I understood the point of these belts. It's just as time has gone, I've kind of lost my zeal for the whole hardcore design stuff. Because, like, these were a more hardcore looking version of tag team championships with the plates all looking like they were in a cage. And then the main plate at the top where it says ECW Tag Team. It's got the buzzsaw looking thing, which was cool. And I got why ECW did this. They wanted a more hardcore looking design as they were about to go on to national television. I don't know, this just wasn't my favorite. I tend to more go for the titles that look more prestigious than hardcore. Still liked it though. In at number 6 would be the third and final version of the ECW World Heavyweight Championship. Again, when it debuted, it had an orange snakeskin backing, which was really cool. And unlike the one that WWE used later, with all the blacking and stuff, this one had a solid gold plate, which looked a lot better. And for some reason, to me, to have that little purple ECW at the top instead of red made a huge difference. I liked this belt a lot better than the version that WWE used eventually. That one was ugly, but this one was beautiful. And actually, this was the very first replica I ever bought. Mainly because at the time, I couldn't get a WWF replica, which if I could have, my very first would have been that Winged Eagle one. At the time, I only had access to WCW and ECW titles. And whereas this wasn't my favorite among the 3 I could get, I just figured it's the world title's prestigious, so that was the very first one I got, and I loved it. And it made me very cool amongst my wrestling friends, till they realized they could go get some too. In at number 5, the very first version of the ECW Tag Team Championship. A lot of people don't really like this belt, but I did. I thought it had a very good ratio of the main plates and the side plates looking good together, matching together, like not overshadowing one another. I thought this could have been their world title. It was so nice looking. The coloring worked with the red banners and the red crown at the top. And to me, again, one of the things I've talked about, one of the most important things about a championship is that it looks good around somebody's waist, which this did. In at number 4, the second version of the ECW Television Championship. The very first one I saw around the waist of Shane Douglas. This was a nice looking championship. It wasn't my favorite. And again, people have talked about, like, but that's the Winged Eagle Championship, you should love it. But it's not the Winged Eagle Championship. There are differences. The side plates were very round and kind of plain. They all just said ECW at the top and then had a flag underneath. Where it was the main plate of the Winged Eagle, it didn't have the side barrier plates. So I instantly liked it because it was kind of a throwback to my favorite championship belt ever, but it wasn't the same. What makes a great championship design is more than just the main plate. In at number 3, the third version of the Television Championship. I really liked this one. I understood why they didn't make this design their world title. It was a lot smaller, but personally I didn't care. Kind of like back in the day, the WWF Winged Eagle Championship, that was their world title, and it was their smallest. It was smaller than their tag teams, smaller than their Intercontinental, but who cares? Recently, this title has come back, in a sense, in GCW. Not completely understanding of it. They just brought it back for a night, I guess, and Matt Cardona won it. I don't know. But it was their updated, hardcore-looking version, and again, I understood why they had to update their belts. They were about to go to national TV. They couldn't have championships that were just kind of throwbacks to old WWF championships. They had to be very distinct and their own, and this, to me, is the one that did knock it out of the park. Whereas I didn't feel the others were better, this one was. This was their best television championship. The side plates in the shape of like the cop badges with the bricklayings and stuff, it all worked. The red banner coloring where it says World Championship, it all worked together perfectly. It was very beautiful. In at number 2, their second version of their World Heavyweight Championship. Really loved it. A lot of people, though, at the time were saying it looked too similar to WCW's World Championship, the big gold belt. I kind of see what they were saying, but not really. It was very distinct. I would never have confused the two. It was definitely a step up from their original World Championship, where the main plate being much bigger, but not way overshadowing the side plates. They all need to work together perfectly, and they did. It was very overall a simple design. It was one that had been used before in other territory promotions, so again, they had to update it for the television move. I just didn't think the last one they had was anywhere close to being as good as this one. And then finally, my favorite ECW title of all time was their second version of their World Tag Team Championships. And I think it's obvious as to why. I was a huge fan of that classic Intercontinental Championship, the one that was originally designed by Reggie Parks, and then later went to the J-Mar design, whatever. They all looked very good. The overall design was always a very nice looking championship. If at some point in WWF they would have decided that's the world title and the Winged Eagle's the Intercontinental title, I would have been okay with that. I would have understood. It's bigger and it's beautiful. I thought the Winged Eagle was better looking, but around that time I had people saying the Intercontinental was the best looking, and I couldn't really argue that too strongly. Just, well, my opinion's different. This was beautiful because it was basically the exact same design, but gave us one little difference. All the plates were silver colored rather than gold coloring. And of course in the front it had a big red ECW on it, but still, it was gorgeous. I loved it. And in fact, I remember watching that very first ECW pay-per-view where the Dudleys defended it against the Eliminators, and my brother seeing that, and he just went nuts. Because growing up, my brother used to be one of those that talked about he liked the Intercontinental Championship more than he liked the World Championship in WWF. And again, I didn't argue with him. I just said, okay, but I like that one better. But then again, he never argued with me either. He was just like, nah, yeah, I get it, but I just like this one better. So to see it with silver color plating instead of gold, it was just very nice, very interesting. I wouldn't say I like the silver plating more than gold, but still, of all the championships ECW ever had, in my opinion, that was their most gorgeous. And yes, to this day, I still very much miss ECW. So there you have it. That's my wrestling review this week. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, hit that little bell so you get notifications for when I post new videos, and leave a comment. Tell me if you agree with my list. Tell me if you disagree with my list. Tell me which of the ECW championships were your favorite. Love you guys.